Congressional ethics, Obamacare, and Russia. I'm Heather Godwin, and this is The Square Circle. Hello and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, political correspondent for McClatchy James Rosen, and Kelley Vlahos of the American Conservative. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
The 115th Congress opened this week with controversy as House Republicans tried to push through an ethics reform. Here's the story from the Wall Street Journal.
House Republicans dropped their bid to limit the independence of a nonpartisan ethics office on Tuesday, after facing a backlash from Democrats, watchdog groups, some fellow Republican lawmakers, and President-elect Donald Trump. House Republicans were trying to put the Office of Congressional Ethics under the oversight of the House Ethics Committee. Democrats created the Office of Congressional Ethics in 2008 to serve as a watchdog by reviewing allegations against House members and staff. The office is governed by a board of private citizens who don't work for the government. But lawmakers have raised concerns over the ethics office, saying it makes complaints against them public and could tarnish their reputations.
So, Gregory Clay, does this episode mean that House Republicans are ethically challenged?
Well, I'm sure anybody can say every day, 24/7, like 7-Eleven, that all politicians are ethically challenged. And it also appeared that the Republicans were trying to pull a fast one on us all, even their own folk. It's a situation of all the S words, you know, secretive, sneaky, surreptitious, stealthy. You know, they apparently got together, Monday night, I think it was, and came up with this idea of trying to avoid an ethics situation from a nonpartisan, independent group that would essentially be checks and balances in terms of ethics issues of the House. And what happened along the way, they were bombarded. The top Republicans, even Paul Ryan, were bombarded with phone calls and messages saying, "What the hell are you doing?" Apparently, that night, one of the top searches on Google was, "Who is my representative?" You know, yeah, because people wanted to know, hey, you know, what are y'all doing? And I want to, you know, that the old saying, you know, I got to call my congressman. And so the next day, you know, it blew up, you know, for the top Republicans. And if you know, I guess the question is, why did they have to go undercover with the thing?
Why did they have to go undercover with the
thing? I mean, that's the big question. You know, Rosen, being a political guy and former Pentagon correspondent, you know, why was there an undercover thing going on?
Well, for reasons that became apparent within 24 hours, which is if they had done it openly, it would have been shouted down immediately rather than taking a little while to filter out. One reason that there was such an outcry is that Donald Trump tweeted about it the next day. He criticized it, and he asked, you know, why are the Republicans in Congress focused on this when there are so much more important issues? Let's move on, something to that effect. Yeah, and that helped galvanize opposition to it. So that's an interesting dynamic, which is that the Twitter-in-chief will now be vetting congressional laws, including from his own party. And that's a new dynamic.
And Kelley Vlahos, what do you think?
Well, just to riff off of that, I think this is a win-win for Trump, because what he was able to do is to show how he is in the corner of the people, and that's why he was elected. That's been his mantra all along. So what he was able to do was put his ear up. He heard loud and clear that both Republicans and Democrats in America weren't going to buy this, and he immediately was able to show that he had the authority to control or at least influence the Congress the way that he wanted to. And so it showed once again, just like these various business deals in which he's gone and embarrassed defense contractors and car manufacturers, that he's in charge and he's working for the people. You can disagree or agree about whether or not he really is, but this is part of his message, and I think this was actually pretty good for him.
Yeah, he also showed that he could rise above the fray, because in his tweet he said we should concentrate on more important things, i.e. Obamacare, corporate tax cuts, and all that. This should not be the top priority coming out of the holiday break.
Do you think it was a comment from him on whether the House Republicans are ethically challenged?
I will say this in defense of the Republicans. The way they went about it was both stupid and, unethical. But having said that, this is the House Ethics Committee. It's separate from the Committee on Ethics, which is part of the House or the Senate Ethics Committee. It's a bipartisan, independent agency that Congress set up, I want to say 10 years ago. It's not very old. And the whole idea is that it would be independent from Congress and bipartisan. There has been some abuse, and both Democrats and Republicans have complained about this. And the abuse has been because number one, outside groups can, anybody can file a complaint. Any one of us could file a complaint, number one. So anybody can file a complaint. You could file a complaint against your political enemy. And number two, you can do so anonymously. And there've been some abuses, as I say. And I wouldn't be surprised if, when the dust settles, the committee will still exist, but there'll be some changes in how the process works.
Well, it sounded like they were, many of the congressmen were in fear of things like witch hunts, things like that. Am I right?
Yeah, and witch hunt's a heavy-handed word, but none of us would want to be accused anonymously by anybody. Basically.
But what I understand is this independent panel had no power to discipline or actually, find any guilt and do anything about it. What it would do is collect the evidence, make a recommendation, then deliver it up to that House Ethics Committee, and then the House Ethics Committee could decide what to do with it. I think, I'm not sure about abuses, but maybe it was overzealousness that they were concerned that maybe they were getting, like you said, the outside groups were politicizing. Outside
groups on the left and the right definitely had tried to politicize the process. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. I'd like to remind our audience that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. As the new Congress opened, Republicans made clear that repealing and replacing Obamacare is at the top of their agenda. Here's Vice President-elect Mike Pence.
We're going to keep our promise to the American people, and we're going to repeal Obamacare and replace it with solutions that lower the cost of health insurance without growing the size of government. Now, there's a broad range of ideas about how we do this, and Republicans have been offering those ideas again and again, literally every year since Obamacare was first signed into law.
It seems that repeal is the easy part, but Kelley Vlahos, will the Republicans be able to find a viable replacement for the law?
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, recent polling has found that half of Americans would prefer there be some sort of federally funded health care, which is a very controversial and divisive issue and solution. About half would like to see a repeal of Obamacare. So I don't see that there is a huge mandate for repealing Obamacare as it is now, though many people, and I don't think anybody at this panel would disagree, that most people are disappointed with the rollout and the implementation of it. As far as a replacement, we're not sure. I think the headlines over the last 48 hours will show that the Republicans have a lot of ideas of how they're going to dismantle the Obamacare, but they are not offering any clear replacement plans as it is now. From what I'm seeing, they want to take away some of the taxes that have been attached to Obamacare. They want to take away some of the subsidies for Medicaid in the states. They want to take away the subsidies for the private marketplace. So they know what they want to take away, but they haven't really offered what they want to replace. Some of the ideas in the past have been personal tax breaks and savings accounts, so that
Savings accounts, I
so you
remember
could
that.
personally pay for it. But that's been kicking around for the last 20 years, and it's gone nowhere because I think there is a lot of aversion to that. There's also been talk about breaking down some of the borders so that there could be more sharing across border lines in terms of like the competition.
Do you mean between states?
Between states. Trump talked about that during the campaign. But as far as really doable plans that would actually keep people on the rolls and paying lower premiums, plus keeping their, the pre-existing conditions clauses, I haven't heard much about it, and I don't know what they're going to be able to do very quickly. So if they repeal something, I don't think they really want to repeal it without having a viable alternative.
No, they're going to set a date in the future. It's not going to be repealed the day we vote. It's going to be 1 year from now, 2 years from now. So they'll give themselves time. They'll give themselves time to come up with an alternative. I want to say, I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a prediction, and I'm surprised that more people haven't been talking about this, which is the insurance industry is one of the most powerful industries in our country. And there are 20 million more people, Americans with health insurance than there were 5 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever the number is. And almost all of them are insured by private, because we didn't go the route of the public option. Almost all of them are insured by private insurance companies. And I think that you're going to see a massive, I think they're biding their time, but I think you're going to see a massive, if this really takes root with the signs that nothing is going to replace it down the road, or at the time that it cancels, I think you're going to see a massive lobbying effort by the insurance companies against this. They're not going to let this Obamacare has been worth huge amounts of money to them. They're not going to let this just disappear.
So you think there's going to be a huge lobbying effort against repealing?
Either against repealing or against repealing it and replacing it with something that doesn't keep a lot of money in their pockets.
Gregory
I
Clay, what's
totally
your
agree.
opinion?
Well, I have to start off by saying the next, when Donald Trump takes over on January 20th, that Newt Gingrich had the best quote of the week.
Newt Gingrich.
That's right. And it's in relation to Obamacare and a bunch of other things. When he said that by Easter, you will need a microscope to find President Obama's legacy. That's cold-blooded. I'm serious. That's cold-blooded. It shows you how straight up and up front that the Republicans are in trying to essentially destroy the dude's master plan. And like I said, to me that's the best quote of the week. And also, I understand that Rand Paul is voting against repealing it.
Right.
Yeah, because he said we don't vote for the repeal unless we have the other R word, replacement set. And Rand Paul is an ophthalmologist, am I right? Yeah. He's a doctor. So, he has a different kind of perspective, I guess.
Okay, Kelley Vlahos.
Well, also, I don't know if you've seen the reporting on the Trump tweet in which he warned his fellow Republicans not to, I forgot what the cliche he used, but basically he's like, if you start breaking it, you're going to own it. And politically, you don't want to be left being seen by the American public as, the party that destroyed health care.
Right.
Because if you start dismantling it without anything to replace it, it's going to be your bag. And right now, he says, it's the Democrats' bag. Let them hang themselves.
But this is what he ran on, was repealing it. So they're should be anxious to get in there and do
he
something.
didn't run on it.
actually.
He didn't run on it as strongly as most of his Republican opponents, to be honest. And let's take a little historical perspective quickly. This is by far not the first major program where an opposition party has ridden in saying they're going to kill it, they're going to repeal it, they're going to replace it. You can go all the way back to Social Security with FDR. When the Republicans took power, believe it or not, Social Security was not popular. You can go back to the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. There have been multiple attempts to weaken it or gut it. You can go to the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. These fights have happened. But what the opposition party usually finds out is that when they get in, these programs have constituencies. They have lobbyists. They're not as unpopular as it sounded when they were just giving campaign speeches, and they don't have replacement, and the American people demand replacements. And so this, I think Obamacare, as we know it, is going to change. I'd be very surprised if it's just repealed wholesale.
Didn't CNN just have an article about coal miners that were concerned about repealing?
Yeah. Right.
And they were certainly a big part of his voting demographic.
Right.
Well, one of the things that they're going to do is, nibble around the edges. And one of the suggestions I heard today was that they were going to remove the penalties against employers who don't provide the health care. But that undercuts the entire, the firmament of Obamacare was to provide health care to everybody, and by making it by penalizing employers for not providing it was in essence guaranteeing it. So if you take that penalty away, then employers have the option, will they just revert back to whatever they were doing before Obamacare? So I really don't know how that and if you start eliminating some of the assistance, the subsidies and the taxes.
The subsidies
and of course, President Obama, speaking of him, went to Capitol Hill and said, "Don't rescue the Republicans." Yeah. So in other words, protect my legacy. The L word.
Yeah.
That's what that's about.
Politics reigns supreme.
But this is
okay, and then we've got to wrap this up.
Quickly. This is how change happens throughout American history. The Republicans before Obamacare were totally against any form of government health plan. Now they're talking about keeping aspects of Obamacare, coverage for pre-existing conditions, coverage for people up to 26. So in some ways, the proponents of Obamacare have already won because these elements are off the board in terms of repealing.
But it's not sustainable because it's too expensive for regular families who don't qualify for Medicaid. It is super expensive to pay for this monthly, and I don't think that's sustainable. They got to do something about that.
That gets back to the subsidies.
Yeah.
Premiums keep going
All
up.
right. Finally, President-elect Donald Trump has been at odds with U.S. intelligence agencies over Russia's role in the U.S. presidential election. Here's the story from CBS News.
Meanwhile, there are new questions about how President-elect Donald Trump will deal with Russia and all those hacking allegations. Just yesterday, Mr. Trump praised Russia's president for not immediately retaliating over new sanctions imposed by the Obama administration for meddling in the U.S. elections. Trump tweeted, quote, "Great move on delay by V. Putin. I always knew he was very smart." The Russian embassy retweeted that comment, and later Vladimir Putin again congratulated Trump in his annual New Year's statement to foreign heads of state and government.
So, James Rosen, is Trump's stance towards Moscow something to be worried about?
I'm going to parse this a little bit because there's a yes answer to that and there's a no answer to that. In a way, it's similar to our discussion earlier in the program about how the House Republicans tried to go about gutting the Congressional Ethics Committee. Here's the similarity. If Trump wants to improve relations with Russia, with Moscow, with the Kremlin, in a covert way, behind the scenes, using the intelligence agencies and so forth, that's bad. That's bad. If he does, so if it's done in secret, if it's done with kind of backdoor deals and so forth, if he and Vladimir Putin were to meet and were to come to secret agreements that were not made public, that would be horrible. However, President-elect Trump did talk pretty consistently throughout the campaign about how in some ways it would be a good thing if Russia and the United States got along better. And in fact, even under the Clinton administration, we worked with them on Syria to some degree. We worked with them. They helped us get the Iran nuclear deal. So there is a little bit of a precedent. So if Trump cooperates with Russia and he hasn't been a very transparent person, but if he improves ties with Russia in a more transparent, upfront way and says, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, Americans might disagree with it. Some people, for certain, on Capitol Hill are not going to like it, but that might not be a bad thing. So it's how he goes about it.
Thank you. Gregory Clay, what's your opinion?
Well, I think Rosen is right about Donald Trump should be more transparent about Russia, and maybe, he can, gain some support. But Trump is, I mean, the dude is so strange in that he goes against his own intelligence people, which is so bizarre,
So that's something to be worried about.
Yeah, and his alibi is what, during the Bush administration, the intelligence people were wrong about weapons of mass destruction. So, they could be wrong about this, which is a rather strange explanation.
Well, it was also many years ago now.
Yeah.
Well, they've been wrong about other things. They didn't see the collapse of the Soviet Union coming.
No.
They've been wrong about a number of things. And here again, it's not so much the opinion substantively that Trump's voicing; it's the fact that he's voicing it publicly and throwing them under the bus publicly. That's the problem I have. I don't have a problem with him criticizing the intelligence.
Kelley Vlahos with American Conservatives. Should we be worried?
I want to parse things out a little. There are so many levels to this that we could talk about. I'm a little, as an observer of the news and working in the media for many years, I'm kind of amused at the sort of hemming and hawing and rending of clothing and pulling at hair about Russia and their hacking. I mean, we'll all remember a couple years ago, I believe now, this massive hack of the Office of Personnel Management, in which 21 million personnel records were hacked. Many of those were security clearances, fingerprints, all traced back to the Chinese. There was never any prosecution, and the Chinese government has vociferously denied it. But intelligence has indicated that people working for the Chinese had been responsible for this hack. And I find that much more of a danger and a threat to national security, seeing that a lot of these were personal information, things that people could be blackmailed about, than I do about John Podesta's emails being hacked. So I do see this as a highly politicized issue. We know the hacking's been going on, whether it be the Chinese, the North Koreans, and us too.
Right.
I don't know if anybody remembers the Stuxnet virus, which of course we deny, but Israel and the U.S. developed a virus to sabotage the Iranians' nuclear program. That's well documented. So this goes on all the time. I just find it sort of like a political circus at this point.
And Mr. Clapper, under oath, the Director of National Intelligence, admitted under oath not too long ago, asked directly by some senators, that we do it too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Time to take some questions from our viewers. From Conrad Keller. Is there a valid argument for putting the Office of Congressional Ethics under the Ethics Committee? Who wants to take?
No.
No.
That's it.
Just
Easy.
no?
That's just, yeah. I mean, it's got to be bipartisan. It's got to be independent. And if you're going to do that, as far as I'm concerned, you may as well not have. You may as well just keep the House Ethics Committee, the Senate Ethics Committee.
Yeah, so I guess it would be like, what, Jesse James investigating Jesse James. Or Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid investigating Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Robert Redford and Paul Newman. So, when it comes to investigations, you need an outside study, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the NFL taught us that. If anybody has taught us anything about outside investigations, it's the NFL. I'll leave it at that.
And let's remember that Watergate, the investigation of Watergate on Capitol Hill went nowhere until there were independent consuls investigating what had happened.
All right, Monique Hamilton. Will Jim Mattis be pro-Russia, or will he push back against Trump on Russia?
Well, I mean, I think General Mattis is a thoughtful, experienced military thinker and leader, and I think I can't jump into his head right now, but I would imagine that he might not be pro-Putin or pro-Russia, but he's probably pro-diplomacy. And I don't think he would have any problem with the two countries coming to the table and developing channels of discussion that are missing right now. Our relationship with Russia at this point has been frayed over Ukraine and Syria, and it needs help. And I think he probably does agree with Trump on the fact that talking is not a bad thing. Reagan did it with Gorbachev. It's not unheard of, and I think he'd be for it.
On the other hand, his nickname is Mad Dog Mattis, so
Mad Dog.
who knows?
Okay, and now it's time for the most underreported stories of the week. And Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, I'm going to start with you this week.
Okay, we ended 2016 with many deaths of famous people and celebrities, and it was striking that many of those folk were under the age of 70. Many of those folk didn't even reach Social Security age, i.e. George Michael and Carrie Fisher. And on Thursday in Chicago, the police and the district attorney charged 4 black young people with hate crimes in that case. And that is going to be one of the biggest stories of the year, because very seldom do you see black folk in the United States charged with hate crimes. So this is huge.
All right, who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
And it's only because for the first time in my career, I get to report some statistics released by none other than United Van Lines.
United Van Lines?
I'm so excited about this. And they released a study, a report that I found fascinating, which was, they call them inbound states that people are moving to, and outbound states, and states that people are leaving. And it's interesting, especially in this political season, to look at the results. Oh. And what's great is they didn't do a top 10, bottom 10. So here's the ranking of the inbound states, the states that they are moving the most people to. South Dakota is number 1.
South Dakota?
South Dakota, yes, your most popular state. Vermont, Oregon, Idaho, South Carolina, Washington State, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona. Here are the outbound states. These will be more familiar. Outbound states: New Jersey, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, Kansas, and Kentucky. And the one observation that I'll make is that the top 4 outbound states all voted for Hillary Clinton. And so I'm not quite sure if there's a connection there, but they are Rust Belt, so-called Rust Belt states, so it's not entirely surprising. I would argue it's a little surprising that South Dakota is the top destination state, but it has a lot of space, though.
This is true.
So newly discovered notes in President Nixon's library have proved once and for all that President Nixon, during the '68 campaign, had actually directed an aide to help thwart peace talks in Vietnam for political gain, so that the Democrats couldn't declare some sort of peace or a victory in that war. This had been suspected for many years, but the notes by H.R. Haldeman, who became Nixon's chief of staff later on when he won, proved that Nixon had asked an aide to step in and throw a proverbial monkey wrench into the talks with South Vietnam, North Vietnam, essentially extending that war, and 1,000 or more American lives, and probably 500,000 or more Laotians and Cambodians. So it's it shows the political corruption is always with us.
That's
It's also the main reason why Lyndon Johnson chose not to run. And so who knows if that hadn't happened,
never know what
Johnson might have run for
re-election.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming with us tonight, and that's all for this week. I'm Heather Godwin, and thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.
have a passion for helping people, want to launch a new charity, or need to raise funds, Voluntary Solutions can help. You have a passion for helping people. We have a passion for helping you. Visit voluntarysolutionsdc.com, 844-739-5488.